Ahoy! Hello, welcome along. It's a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week chatting to an author that's dived into a lot of different genres, Luca Veste. He writes crime, thriller, horror, and his new book is called You Never Said Goodbye. We talk about what happens in the year of a writer, also how becoming a confident author has changed what he's willing to work on, and what he thinks about whenever he feels the pressure of storytelling.
I have the best job in the world. I get to sit there and make things up for a living. That's that's a gift that someone has given to me to have, to be able to do with my life. So in those early days where it's, you're discovering new characters and new settings, and you have the endless possibility of going anywhere with the book. That's the best time.
There's all that and loads more, so much more on the way with Luca Veste in this week's Writer's Routine. Yes. Hello, welcome along. This is Writer's Routine. The show, it's dead simple, where we take a look inside the working day of an author. Really is that easy. We look at how they get ideas, how they sit down, where they sit down, when they sit down, why they sit down to get that idea out and hopefully to publish it. My name's Dan Simpson. Thank you for being there. This week we're chatting to Luca Veste. He's known for the Murphy and Rossi books, but has written many other thriller and crime and horror novels, and he really is immersed in the writing world. Even if you've never read any of Luca's work, you might know him from blogging online, or hosting the Two Crime Writers and a Microphone podcast, or co-founding the Locked In Festival. He also plays in the Fun Lovin Crime Writers. He is the third member of the band to be on the show, along with Mark Billingham and Val McDermid. Also, you've got Chris Brookmeyer in there, Stuart Neville, and Doug Johnson. We talk about that, why he's so into the world of writing, why that's such a big deal to him. And we chat all about his brand new book, You Never Said Goodbye. It's all about Sam Cooper, who lost his mum early in life. And then Sam gets a call from his dad, which changes everything that he thought he knew about his mum. You can hear how the idea has been brewing for Luca since a very similar thing happened to him when he was only 8 years old. We also talk about how he works with an editor, and if he manages ever to switch off from the story. And you can hear what a year looks like in the life of a full-time author. That's all on the way, and we kick things off as we always do with Luca Veste and what he sees around him in the place where he sits down to write.
So I have a large canvas painting picture on the wall next to me on my left, which is of the Fun Lovin Crime Writers, the band of crime writers I'm a part of. That was bought for me one Christmas. So that's like a kind of reminder of, while I'm writing, that there is fun to be had as well during being a writer. There's a globe on my desk, which I just thought looked nice. And then behind me are all my bookshelves, which are filled with all the various books that I've acquired over the years.
So you've got the globe on the desk, you said. Just what else is on that desk in front of you? Like writing paraphernalia, I would imagine. Is there a lot of notebooks and post-it notes? How does that look?
So it's a lot of post-it notes. It's a lot of scribbles of various ideas, lines, plot points that make no sense to anyone but myself. It's just it's basically my brain just on paper, which tends to make the process a lot more difficult than it should be. I did try getting a whiteboard when I was about a couple of years into being a full-time writer. I thought, right, I need to be more professional, and I've seen all of these professional writers with these whiteboards. So I went to my local Tesco and I bought two, and they still live in my office, but I don't remember where they are now. And they have the notes for a book I probably wrote about 8 years ago still on them.
Why could you not persevere with them? What was it about them that kind of wasn't how you imagined they would be?
No, I think it was just it wasn't exactly how I needed to. I couldn't. it was the whole writing on the board and then referring back to the board. The boards weren't big enough. They didn't make sense because I had to write smaller. It was just, I find that like just a random bunch of notes is what kind of works better for me, which is it's a strange thing because anyone who comes in and sees it thinks that I may have slightly lost my mind and don't know how to order my thinking.
Is there a system or structure in the randomness to the notes, even the way that you lay them out, maybe?
There is to me, and I can kind of quickly find things that I need to find. So there is order to the chaos in my head. I mean, there are moments of absolute terror when I realise that I've written 4 pages of notes that I have absolutely no idea what they refer to, what they're for, and I just leave them. I leave them to one side, and I hope at some point, and it usually does work, I will remember what I was telling myself to do at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Aside from these notes, is there any formal plotting or structure anywhere, or does it all just exist inside your head?
For the most part, it exists inside my head, and I don't tend to plot out exactly what I'm going to write, because I would get bored very quickly if I kind of wrote to, a script of a sort. So I do keep, a lot of it in my head of like I need to get to from this point to the next point, and then I'll sit down and write and see how that works. But no, I don't tend to plot out from page 1 to page 400 exactly what's going to happen, because I change my mind quite a lot while I'm writing.
Run me through this. It gets quite niche and nerdy. Listeners are very interested in like software and font. So what are you writing on, and what do you write with when you're on there?
So I have a desktop computer, and I write on Microsoft Word in Times New Roman font 12 double spaced. I found Times New Roman to be the best font that made sense to me. I've tried Garamond. I used to write in Arial, which I can't do now, and I look back and think how I ever did that because it just doesn't look right. I find that Times New Roman actually looks more like a book while you're writing it. So this is niche and nerdy, isn't it? It gives me the feel that I am, that what I'm writing is actually going to end up in the book, whereas something like an Arial or God forbid, Comic Sans would look like just the mutterings of a crazy person.
What's interesting is that that's probably the most detailed answer I've ever had to the font question. If you kind of floating around, this is what I've done in the past, and now I'm doing this. That's amazing. Listen, Luca, the show is Writer's Routine, so talk us through yours, if you will. The moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed on a day when you are writing, how does it look?
So I'll get up at around 7:30, 8 o'clock. I've got 2 children who are in high school, so they'll toddle off at about 8:20 to school, which is only a few minutes away. Then my wife and I will invariably watch whatever's on Channel 4 that morning, which is usually one of the US sitcoms that's often repeated, so it'll be King of Queens or Everybody Loves Raymond or Frasier, and I'll have breakfast and I'll sit down at my desk at about 9:30, and then I'll probably spend an hour procrastinating before I actually start. I'll answer email, I'll check social media, and then I'll start writing, and I aim to write at about 1,000 to 1,500 words that morning. So it'll be a couple of hours. I don't read over what I wrote the day before. I know a lot of writers do that. I don't do that. I tend to just keep going until the end. I'll stop for lunch 12:30 till 1 o'clock. I'll have a long lunch. an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, and I'll check. I'll procrastinate again. I'll check what's changed on social media in the last hour and a half. What's the latest news? Is there any new emails? Is there, I'll be chatting to someone on WhatsApp, or I'll get a phone call from a friend, or so then it'll be about 2:30. I'll get another hour or so in. The kids come back from school about 3:30. We catch up with them, and then I'll get another hour in where I'll get 500 words, possibly, hopefully, in, and then I'll start cooking tea at about 5:00. That's the nice day. When I'm getting closer to a deadline, that's very, very different. So what will invariably happen is I will get to around 60,000, 70,000 words and realize that I want to change everything because I've had another idea. So I will then be working from 9:00 in the morning till 9, 10 o'clock at night, sometimes later, where I'm basically revising what I've written earlier on to make sense to what I'm writing now, to change, aspects of the book from earlier on, so it all makes sense. And that'll take, so I'll be writing possibly 5,000 to 6,000 words a day, but also deleting 1,000 to 2,000 words from earlier in the book because now it doesn't make sense. And that usually happens a week or two before I'm about to deliver the book. But yeah, so they're the days where I don't like to. That's when that's when I pretend that I'm, that's the days that I don't tend to remember when I'm writing, when I'm talking about writing a book, because they're the bad days. But yeah, the nice days are the beginning of the process where it's just a 9 to 5 job with a lot of breaks, and it's nowhere near as difficult as those couple of weeks at the end of the process.
Now, I know that you're cracking through the words, as you've said. I mean, you must get well over 2,000 done in a day, ideally. It does sound like quite joyfully leisurely, but quite compartmentalised as well. So you know that, right, I'm going to write for this hour, then I'll break and I'll have my lunch, and then this hour, then the kids will come, then I'll write for this hour. How much pressure do you find now you are a full-time writer? How much pressure is there, and do you feel to get it done when you are there on your writing days?
The pressure is always there because I've got rent to pay, so it's the book has to be finished, and it has to be finished in good time. But I don't tend to feel the pressure until it's getting much closer to a deadline. But at that beginning bit, there isn't any pressure. I'm sitting there having discovered that I have the best job in the world. I get to sit there and make things up for a living. That's that's a gift that someone has given to me to have, to be able to do with my life. So in those early days where it's, you're discovering new characters and new settings, and, you have the endless possibility of going anywhere with the book. That's the best time. There's no pressure there, really. It's just an absolute joy to do. There is that flip side of, you are taking a gamble every time you start a book, because you could work for months on a book that may never see the light of day, which has happened to me twice, where I've had to stop writing because it just wasn't working. But it doesn't mean that when I sit down for the next one that I think I've got to get this right this time, because I may spend months not, and have nothing to show for it at the end. I still find a joyful experience, especially with the books I'm writing now, which are very different to the ones I started writing, where there is just an endless possibilities of what I can do with a certain group of characters. And I enjoy seeing where my brain will take me. And sometimes it'll send me into blind alleys and that's not fun. But most of the time, it's still the best. I've had some terrible jobs. This is still the best job I've ever had. So I always feel grateful for having it.
What tricks and tips have you learned along the way for maybe unblocking yourself when the words are struggling to come out? Maybe a walk or a cup of coffee at a certain time, anything like that? Maybe music for you in the background?
I constantly have music on while I'm writing. I can't write in silence. That just is, it's anathema to me. I can't do it. So I'll have music on constantly, but that doesn't tend to have any effect on anything other than to just have something on in the background. What stops me from getting blocked, which I say stop, it doesn't really stop. It kind of helps if I do, is just a walk. Usually just around the house will do. My wife will be sitting in the living room and I'll just appear all of a sudden and I'll be just stood at the window, just looking out, just at the street, just having a little nose of what's going on, and then I'll walk around the house and go back to my desk, and suddenly I can see where I'm supposed to be going with that sentence I've finished, stopped at mid-sentence. So I can go back and it seems to have unlocked. But when it gets a bit worse than that, I have to step away. That's the biggest tip I've got is not just to keep trying and trying when it's just not happening. It is to step away, go for a walk, go and do something else, and that helps me a lot. But it tends not to happen as much now. I don't know if that's just a bit more experience or luck. I would imagine it's more luck than anything. But yeah, it seems to be the case that I know I've only got this set amount of time to write. This is my working hours. I don't tend to, have a problem with, okay, I'm going to sit there. And also, I write quite quickly, so I can box off 2,000 words in an hour or two, and I'd be happy with that. And yes, they will need editing, and they will need going over again, but at least the words are there to be changed. And I always find that having something on the page rather than nothing to work with is the best way that I work. I have absolutely no problem with having the worst first draft ever produced. I have no problem with that. It's something that I've done from the beginning, and I can't imagine sitting there and revising every single last word before I deliver to my agent and my editor. I won't do that, because I value their opinion so highly that I tend to just, it's almost what I call it is like a vomit draft, where it's just my brain is just, this is the idea I've had for the story. This is the story, and it's just out there. And now you help me make it make sense. That's what I do. It's like I rely on them to kind of say, like, yeah, okay, this makes, this does make sense in here. This doesn't. I don't know what we're doing over here, and what this character is doing, and what happened to this person, and you seem to have gone from being in one country to another within, like, I'm not really explaining how that happened. I do spend some time, as I said, towards the end of writing, when I'm getting closer to delivering, is when I've changed my mind, is to go back and make it make sense. But the actual words themselves, I can get a first draft done in 4 to 6 weeks, and then spend 6 to 8 months editing it. And I find that's the way that I work best, is to have the words on the page to revise, rather than trying to make those words as best as possible before letting anyone else see it. I have no airs and graces about my books. I say that, but there's only like 2 people who ever see those very early drafts. But yeah, I've no problem with working with my editor and my agent on those first drafts. And letting them see this, these terrible early versions of the books that eventually get published.
Let's run through. Lastly, actually, when you've kind of finished that last bit of writing for the day and you're making dinner or whatever it is, how good are you at switching off? Because you seem to be very good at compartmentalizing when you are writing in these couple of hours bursts. What about at the end of the day? Can you just let it go, or is it always there?
It's always there. It never leaves me. When I'm really deep into a book, it's very consuming. And there are TV series that we've watched in the evenings that I have absolutely no memory of us ever watching, because I've been just sat there just going over and over things in my head about the book I was currently writing. It's only because it's only a short space of time as well where I'm writing those first drafts. It's very easy to get lost in them, and to get lost in those stories and go like, oh, how do I make this work? How does this character make sense to me? What are their motivations, and how do I get from this place to this next place? And invariably those evenings where I'm just going over and over those parts of the story that I'm trying to figure out, where the answers come from. It makes it more difficult, at home, because, most of the time people are, I've got a wife and two children who, they want to have, a back and forth conversation, whereas I may not be in the same room mentally with them. So like, they'll have to give me a nudge and say, are you thinking about the book? And it's like, yes, sorry, it's, I'm just staring into space. But yeah, I find those a lot of, I didn't realize how much of being a writer was literally just thinking. It's like, I have to say, like, it's like if, people come in and say, well, I didn't hear the keyboard clacking away, and it's so you weren't obviously working, and it's like, no, I'm thinking. That's part of the job. So when I'm sat in the living room, it's like, I'll have to have like a little pad next to me where I can just jot down things, and then they go back on the desk of the random disordered thoughts.
Could you run us through a writing routine of a year, I'd say? I'm always interested to see how full-time writers do it, when they get ideas, then when they'll start writing them. So say you've just handed in your final copy of a novel. What happens the next day? And then kind of run us through, I guess, the next 12 months. When do you have the idea? How long will you give that to brood in your brain? When will you start writing that?
So I'll have usually a couple of ideas, very brief, very, very sparse ideas. When I've delivered the final version of a book, I will write down literally that day, I'll write down a couple of ideas to myself of maybe possibly one line, thoughts, or a character name, or a very brief description of a plot, or usually a theme is in there as well. So they'll be like, okay, I want to write about grief or something like that. The celebrity was one of, I think it was my third novel, was very much about celebrity, and my sixth book was about friendship, and things like that will go into like a word cloud or anything like that, but it's, just little jottings to myself. So that will happen pretty much as at the day possibly of me delivering the final version of the book, but it'll already have been percolating before that of what I was going to write next. So then I'll try and refine those ideas over the course of a month, whilst I'm doing all the things I hadn't done in the year previous while I was writing the last one. So it's, that's like my downtime. And then I'll have a meeting with my editor and my agent, and we'll go over what ideas I've got for the next book, and I'll run through some of them. I don't like to write in a vacuum. I like them to know, what I am working on. So we'll have a meeting, and we'll go over the ideas, and I basically will pitch a few different ideas and see which one gets the best reaction and go, okay, that might be the one. But it's also like I'll then spend a good few weeks where I'll try not to plot out a book, but just to see if the idea has legs. Is it going to be, a good enough story to sustain itself over 400 pages, which is always the difficulty, because you may have an idea and after writing 5,000 words realize you've written a short story and not a full-length book, which publishers really don't appreciate if you deliver. They've paid for 400 pages. I'm trying to deliver a pamphlet. They don't like that. So I will spend a good few weeks doing that, and then I'll start a first draft. And when I start a first draft, I usually have the opening scene, 2 characters, and a midway plot point, and that'll be it. And I'll just start writing, and I'll have a first draft done usually within 2 months, sometimes 3. As I've gone further in my career, it's tending towards the 3-month mark, and then I'll deliver that draft, and then we spend a good 5 to 6 months editing. We usually do 5 to 6 drafts back and forth. My editor is great for, picking up on things that don't quite work and pointing those out, and allow me the space to work it out for myself of how to fix those. She's not prescriptive in that way. She says, like, I don't think this quite works. What can you make this make more sense, or that type of thing? And I go back and I can usually see it for myself. So that will happen 4, 5, 6 times where we'll go back and forth. And then, it usually takes a space over 5 to 6 months. And that takes up most of the year. Then it's copy edits after that. Once we're both happy with the draft, the copy editor will come back invariably with different things that usually just to do with timings of this all takes place in one day, and then we lose 4 days and things like that. It's like, okay, I'll go back and fix that. And then it's, and then all of a sudden you realize that it's been a year since you've been writing this book, and you've been living with it for a year, and you've been dealing with it for a year, and then you're done with it. And then it may be another 6 to 8 months, or maybe sometimes it's been even longer before the book comes out, by which time I'm already writing another book. And usually I'll be doing events talking about a book that I have absolutely no memory of writing. I don't know anything about the book, and I have to check it. I have to go back and check and see what it's about. And that's happened to me numerous times where I've been doing events for books that I wrote 2 years before then, just because of publishing schedules and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then I'll have to go back and go like, well, who is that person? What was that? Why did I do that? What was, and then you start questioning past Luca. That's when it's fun. Just going, oh, what was I thinking there? Or, well, that was quite good. I can't believe I came up with that. Which is always good fun to discover. But during all of that time, of course, as well as you're doing a lot of events, you're doing a lot of things like this, where you're talking about on podcasts and things like that. And you have to kind of fit all of that in around, doing the actual work that means you can do all of those fun things like events and gigs.
We'll be back with more from Luca in just a sec on the show. I hope you're really enjoying this week. It's a good, beefy one, really going through the reads of what happens when you're a full-time author. And hopefully there's some brilliant tips in there too that might help you get published if that's something that you're working to one day. If you are enjoying the show, by the way, if you think that we maybe have helped out on that journey to you being a published author, you can always support us. You can always help us out and pledge to become a backer at patreon.com/writersroutine. Really doesn't cost a lot. A few dollars a month helps us keep going. It helps us keep bringing you these chats with the best authors around as often as we can. For that, you get our unending thanks, of course. You get that really just for listening. Also, you get merch. You get bonus content, extra episodes, and there is even a way for your book to sponsor this show. If you'd like to make that happen and help us out in the process, if you'd like a big old plug on the show for thousands of listeners around the world every week so they can hear exclusively about your book, become a backer, pledge to support the show. Just a few dollars a month. Anything that you can spare goes an extraordinarily long way over at patreon.com/writersroutine. Let's get back to it then, chatting with Luca Veste about his new novel, You Never Said Goodbye. It's all about Sam Cooper, who lost his mum early in life, and then he gets a call from his dad, which changes everything that he thought he knew. You can hear about why it's been percolating for a while, ever since an event in his childhood. Also, we talk about why he writes in different genres and what he needs to do before he starts writing them. And as I've said, Luca's fully immersed in the world of writing. He hosts a writing podcast, has started a writing festival. He's in a band, the Fun Lovin Crime Writers, with other crime writers. And we talk about that. Why is he fully dived into this world?
I had no plans to be a writer whatsoever. I didn't write when I was a kid. I read extensively. I grew up on council estates and across Merseyside. And what I was always lucky is that they always had a library. So that was like a free form of entertainment. Because I grew up in a very, very poor household. We had a television that you had to put £1 in and you got 8 hours. And my dad would invariably say, like, well, I need at least 3 to 4 for the evening. So you can't just put the telly on in the day, kids. You have to find your own entertainment. And I found that there was a place where you could go and get free entertainment. They let you take it home and then you can bring it back and get different free entertainment the next day in the library. So I found that and I read everything I could get my hands on as a kid until I was about 14 or 15. And then like every other young lad in Merseyside, you either wanted to be a footballer or a boxer. And I tried both and failed at both. I wanted to be an actor, failed at that. I wanted to be a musician, failed at that. I did, I was in bands and did the pub circuit for years. And I kind of fell into full-time work, and I worked in the civil service in my 20s. And it was made redundant when I was about 28. And I had a choice to make. My wife was instrumental in saying to me, you should have gone to university. She's always said that to me. You should have gone to university when I was younger. And I was like, that was never an option for any of us. That wasn't something that people like me did. And she said, well, you've got time now. We've got, the opportunity to go and see if you can do it. So I went and did an access course at the University of Liverpool. That went really well. So I started studying criminology and psychology. During this time, I kind of fell back in love with reading. I started reviewing books online on my own blog. This is back in 2010, 2011, when there wasn't as many as there is now. There's a huge amount of blogs now. There wasn't that many when I was doing it. And it was through reviewing books that I started talking to other writers, and I kind of just fell into writing short stories accidentally. But I still, at that point, still didn't think that was, what I was going to do. It was something other people did. When I was growing up, I thought you had to be very posh, very rich, and live in a castle. Then you could become a writer. I didn't think it was available for people like me, so I never tried. And it wasn't until I got to 28, 29 years of age that I realized that, I'm allowed to do this. I come from a very large family. And in order to stand out, you have to be able to tell a good story. So it was always there, the ability to tell a story. I just didn't know how to kind of express it. I started writing short stories. They got a really good reaction. And it was just like the next step was to write a novel. It was just organic. So I started writing a novel. This is during my first year at university as a mature student. That got picked up by an agent. Then it got published in my second year at university. It was by Avon, who were part of HarperCollins. And then book 3, when I was in third year at university, that got picked up by Simon Schuster and got picked up for an amount, which meant that I knew then I wasn't going to become a psychologist. I wasn't going to do anything to do with my degree. I was going to be a full-time writer. Obviously by that point, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I'd spent 20 years not realizing that this is what I wanted to do. And so when I realized how much I enjoyed it, and not just the writing part, the community, I wanted to immerse myself in it completely. And when I do that, I do go overboard. I do everything I can to not just, make friends and things like that, but just to try and give back something as well. And I'm also very much a show off. So doing events was incredibly easy for me because, all that acting that I did when I was younger was all just about showing off. It was all just, it's all just, just a performance. And it's something I really enjoyed doing. So I did as many events as I can, which leads to obviously, doing a lot more of that kind of thing. That led to doing the podcast because that's just another way of being, show off. It's like I think I'm interested enough for people to listen to my voice for an hour and a half. So I did that with Steve Kavanagh, and we have a lot of fun doing that. And then the band came along, which was just more about recapturing something that was lost. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be in a band, and then after 4 or 5 years of doing the pub circuit on my own, to 3 or 4 people in a pub getting paid, 20 quid, that kind of, I fell out of love with it. But the band, Fun Lovin Crime Writers, is just pure fun. And, that has been the best thing in the last couple of years of, last few years before, the pandemic where we couldn't do gigs. It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic. We're just getting back to it now. We've got a fair few gigs lined up and yeah, that's amazing. But these are all opportunities that are unlocked through, writing those short stories all those years ago and taking a chance, and trying something that I didn't think I had any reason to be doing, any ability to do. And yeah, it's been an incredible ride for like the last decade. I think last year was my 10 years of writing. So I've been doing it 11 years now. I've done some terrible jobs in the past. I did anything I could just to make some money because, I wanted to make money. I've worked in chippies. I've worked in a pizza place making dough for pizza bases. Oh, that was the way. It was horrible. I've done. I've worked in pawnbrokers. I worked for 6 months as a kitchen and bathroom designer. I had absolutely no experience of doing so. I was 19 and I absolutely just went into an interview and just blagged it completely, where I was like, yeah, I had no problem doing this. And then they let me go eventually when they realised I couldn't design kitchens and bathrooms. I've done some, I've done some terrible jobs. And this by far is the greatest job in the world. So being immersed in the community of it is just my way of enjoying the best job I've ever had even more. This story has been in mind for a good number of years. Because the initial idea for the book was based on something that happened when I was 8 years old. So the idea has existed for a long time. My mum left when I was 8, and we didn't see her for a number of months, and she came back. But I always wondered what would happen if she had never came back. And I didn't know why she'd left, or I knew why she'd left, but I didn't know what had happened to her. So the idea for this book, so for the last 10 years, it was one of those things that was in the back of my head of it would be interesting to explore as an idea. While writing a book is to explore something that, I've never really been able to come to terms with. So I had this idea but I didn't know how to approach it, especially with the books I was writing before. They were all the first 4 were police procedurals, and I wrote a crime horror crossover, then another police procedural, and that idea wouldn't have quite worked with any of those novels. When I moved publisher with my 8th novel, it gave me the opportunity to kind of approach writing in a different way, in a different kind of subgenre of crime. And this idea was instant of, this is what I've wanted to write about for a long time, and now I have the opportunity and the space to kind of do it. The initial idea didn't actually come to pass when I was writing the book. I did change quite a lot of that personal story to make it more interesting as a book, because all the best ideas that you have before writing a book don't tend to work properly. So it did change a little bit in that in the writing of the book, but that still, that sense of loss and grief is patently in the book. It's come from a very dark personal place. Like Sam Cooper, the main character in the book, goes through a lot of the same thoughts and processes and same experiences that I did as I was growing up. Of the abandonment of it is of a parents not being there anymore. It's very much there in the pages. So the idea came to me. This is like the idea came to me years and years ago when I started writing that this would be a good idea for a book. But yeah, it wasn't until book 8 that it actually came to be.
So when you sit there at book 8 and you're finally going to write this story that's been bubbling away for a little while, what do you do before you type that first sentence? How much do you kind of figure out about what this plot is going to be, especially for a story like this that you have sat on for a little while?
So I had a rough sketch of what I wanted to explore through the book. I wanted to it open with the disappearance of Sam's mother, and then to jump forward in time to when he's an adult and how that kind of experience has infected him growing up. That obviously changed, because if you read the book, that's not what happens now. But I mean, it's more about like now, she dies at the beginning, and he's there when it happens. So it's very much more concrete. He knows what happened to her. But then it became very much more about the mystery of when he returns to his father's bedside. After he's been taken to hospital, he hasn't seen his dad for 20 years, and his dad informs him of something that just can't be true. The mystery of that is what drives the book. That was very much there in the beginning when I started writing the book. If someone came along to you and told you everything you thought you knew for the past 20, 30 years wasn't the case, it's like, how do you deal with that? I knew at that point that although the book would start in the UK, I knew I wanted a broader canvas. So I knew that America would be where most of the book would be set. So I started researching different places in America. So I'd written about 70 pages, and I kind of stopped for a good 2 to 3 months just looking at different settings in America about where I wanted the book to be set. And I ended up going on a research trip to America. After doing a hell of a lot of Google Street Maps and YouTube videos, I decided on a place that I thought would work. I went to Connecticut, a small town in Connecticut called Mystic. I decided I was going to do this. I was going to. I've never done anything like this before. My research consisted of me just getting on a bus in the middle of Liverpool and just going around or just remembering places. So I did the journey that I knew that Sam in the book would have to do. So I did it myself. I flew into Boston. I got the Amtrak down to Mystic in Connecticut, and then I spent a week just walking around and talking to people and going to various diners and bars, and I would walk miles just around the place just to get a feel of it. I went to the local bookstore. I'd go into the local antique store. And I would talk to people while I was there, and I'd tell them what I was doing, and I'd ask them questions, and I found out so much information that didn't even end up in the book for the most part. But it gave me a sense of the place that I wouldn't have had. I did this 2 weeks before the first lockdown in the UK. I landed I landed, and about a week and a half later, we're now not allowed to leave the house. So I timed it well. I still have the copy of the Connecticut newspaper that I picked up on my last day there. It's called The Day. And on the headline of that paper, it's first case confirmed in the state. So I'll keep that for a long time because everything changed after I got back. So I wrote the book, during lockdown. So I didn't have the opportunity to, go and kind of procrastinate too much because it was, there was not much else to do other than write, and I think that kind of worked for me a lot, to be honest. So I mean, that's is 2 years ago. So it shows you what how long it can take for writing a book to actually seeing it on the shelves. It can be a long, long time. But yeah, those first 70 pages, whilst they didn't end up for the most part being in the published version, they did give me a very good idea about what the book was about mostly, and they gave me a good sense of who Sam was and how he was going to react to being told that his whole life had been a lie.
It's interesting you were saying you had sat on this book because it wouldn't fit into other genres that you've worked on before. You've done police procedural and kind of crime horror and now thriller. When you're switching genre like that, how much do you think about what's changing and what you need to write? So, for instance, when you're writing crime as opposed to a police procedural crime, how much do you think about the little tweaks that need to be made?
I think about them a lot. I think about them a lot because I don't want to get anything wrong. When I was writing the police procedurals, I would spend hours upon hours just driving down into the minutiae of how the police would work, and how police procedurals. I read as many books in those genres as possible, because that's the best way to learn how to write a book, is to read a lot of them. So I'd read every police procedural just to see if I was doing it right. Crime horrors, the same, where there was those crime horror kind of crossovers. There's people who've done that really, really well. Like there's Steve Mosby, there's John Connolly, there's Mo Hader. So I read everything that they wrote. But I think as I've got more confidence as a writer, I've started writing more about. I started writing the books that feel right to me, and I kind of trust my experience as a reader of those genres. And I don't tend to write in genres that I haven't read because I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm not going to write a romance novel because I have absolutely no idea how that they work. I leave that to the experts. But I do think about the mechanics of it quite a lot. So when I was writing You Never Said Goodbye, because it's very different to what I'd written before, I did think about the fact that pace was always going to be the biggest thing for that book. It had to be relentless. It couldn't just be okay, this set piece happens and then 40 pages nothing happens other than some people talking. I discovered that from writing various drafts of the book, though. So in the first early versions of the book, one of the things that I noticed quite quickly was that I would have a big set piece on stage. There would be a big fight or there would be a chase scene. And then for 40 pages, it would just be two people talking. And if I'm getting bored, then I definitely think that a reader will be. So I had to change that, and that was a very big change in how I wrote novels. My earlier books were very much based on a lot of dialogue and a lot of character interaction. I don't know where that came from, but that's just how I kind of wrote the books, of just characters interacting. This one was a bit different in that, there would still be that element of it, but there would also be a hell of a lot more action in it as well, because I wanted the reader to be able to just sit down and just keep reading and not realize how much time has passed, rather than it being, I'll pick up this book, I'll read a few chapters and I can put it down because, when I come back to it, and I'll be okay. This is very different. That was a huge change. And that took a long time to get right, and numerous drafts of the book to get right. Because you can also then go too far the other way, where it's just like, how is this guy still standing up? There's far too much happening. So I kind of did break down the book quite a lot, and went, okay, so this page, this is happening, okay, and then 10 pages later, this can happen, and then, and did it that way, where, it was a bit more mechanical than usually it usually is. But it did work for that book, and it's working for the one I'm writing now as well, where I can look at it in that way and not lose any of the kind of heart and the realism that I feel the book has to have as well. It did make a huge difference changing subgenre. So it's all under the umbrella of crime, but these subgenres do have quite a lot of differences between them. So writing like Dead Gone, my first novel, for example, was very different to writing You Never Said Goodbye. The processes were incredibly different. But I feel like if I'd have tried to write this book as my first novel, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It's only by having that experience of writing 7 novels before, and I felt comfortable and confident enough to actually attempt to write it. I'm glad I found, I'm glad I tried it in the end. I'm really enjoying writing this kind of book.
Thank you so much to Luca Veste for coming on the show. You can get a copy of the brand new book You Never Said Goodbye right now. If you do fancy it, support your local bookshop if you can. That would really go a long way. Next week on the show, one of my heroes, really, Danny Wallace. He's an author, he's a broadcaster, he's a presenter. He's a man of many ideas who does them. You might know him from Yes Man, which became the Jim Carrey movie, much changed Jim Carrey movie, but effectively Danny spent the whole year just saying yes to every decision. Also, he wrote Join Me, where he started a cult based on kindness. Since those young man projects, I think he calls them, he's moved into writing for adults, and he writes for kids as well. And we talk about that. We talk about how he figures out where an idea is going to go. It's a brilliant chat. I know you're going to love it. That's next week with Danny Wallace. In the meantime, follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can get in touch at writersroutine.com, and by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. We are at WritersPod there. And if you can, I'd love to see you backing the show and pledging to help us at patreon.com/writersroutine. And we're back next week with Danny Wallace on the show. Until then, bye.